here at DLI. I know I've spoken with a number of you before regarding eForms or just questions that you all have had on eForms specifically. So what we wanted to do today for you all was kind of have a structured or a less structured answer hour that's specifically going to surround eForms. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I am going to go ahead and record this so that we can make it available on our website afterwards. Additionally, what I did go ahead and do, since we've got a number of people on this call today, I did just go ahead and I muted all of you, and then I just ask that you all use the chat if you don't mind if you've got questions. So I'll just kind of checking that periodically. So as I mentioned, I did want to keep this a little different from our other answer hours, just because you all have some very unique questions, and I know that there's been some unique issues that people have been having related to eForms. So what I want to do is I kind of want to run through those frequently asked questions. I want to address all of your questions, and then I actually want to run through just a few demonstrations of the eForms with some of the commonly missed fields, some of the common issues that people are having, and hopefully it'll make this all a little bit easier for everybody filing via eForms. Like I said, just a really quick agenda. We'll run through the frequently asked questions that we've been seeing related to eForms, and then we'll do just a Q&A and a demo, and we'll run through the upcoming answer hour sessions that we have scheduled for some of our other groups. So starting out with frequently asked questions, these are the questions that I've noticed or that the EDI team has noticed that we've received just pretty frequently from a lot of different eForm submitters. So the first one, I'm getting a transaction party error. How do I fix this? So what is happening with a lot of people, specifically on your FROI URs, is that you are getting a transaction party error. And we have this documented as something that we are working on our end, but there is a way that you can bypass this in the meantime if you are having this issue. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my test system here and show you all exactly how to do that. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my Canvas login. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log in as an eForm submitter here. And this is a really common issue that people are seeing on their update reports, on their FROI update reports. So what I want to do is I want to actually run through a FROI update report example and show you exactly how to avoid this issue. Now, if I go ahead and I click Submit eForm or Web Form, I'm going to click Submit an Update Report, and then I'm just going to populate this information for a claim that I've already got in my test system set up. So bear with me just a second while I copy and paste this over. If you, for some reason, do not have this information for a file and you are trying to file a UR, you can send our EDI team an email. We can get WIDs or jurisdiction claim numbers, campus file numbers for you if you do not have that information. Just grab my WID or employee number here and my date of injury. So this is just going to take a couple seconds to load. And it's going to pull all of my information that I've got in the DLI file. Now, this particular error is typically going to be associated with your employer information. So employer fields aren't all required on the FROI URs, but it will save you a little bit of a headache or even a big headache in some situations if you just go ahead and complete the employer fields in instances where they don't carry over from your claim. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to put my employer theme. Change my name here. Now, in most situations, or some situations, this mailing address may be blank. What you'll want to do is just complete this mailing address, and then that should eliminate your 001 error. So I'm deleting it right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and repopulate it. So it's your mailing address. And that's typically going to take care of that 001 location error. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint. It looks like we've got a question in the chat. All right. So this actually goes along with another question, the next question that I was going to address. So Lynette, your question was that you're unable to file eForms because your city name is too long for the claim administrator, and you can't edit it. So if you run into that situation, please send something directly to our EDI team. We can make a change on our end to shorten that name for you in the trading partner profile, and that should alleviate that issue for you. Now, that is something that is happening that is directly related to this next question, actually. This, when I try to submit a SURE transaction, nothing happens, and what should I do? So what's happening a lot of the time is this is pretty specific to our URs or our legacy claims. I'm going to go ahead and go back in my test environment again. There are a couple fields that you want to look at to make sure that you're not going to run into this error. So like I said, definitely make sure that your employer information is completed on your FOIUR. A couple other really important fields are going to be your occupation description. Now, this is not something that is edited on a FOIUR. It's not a field that we usually look at, but it is a field that if you submit something, we're going to update it. What happens in some situations is that this exceeds the max number of characters. So this is going to cause problems. It's just going to keep you from being able to submit the FROIs or the SHROIs after you've submitted the FROI UR. So what I would recommend doing is if you are submitting that FROI UR, take a look at this occupation description field. If you know that it looks very, very long, like 50 characters or longer, just go ahead and shorten that field before submission. That usually is going to take care of that issue. Another field that you want to pay attention to is the employer information again. So like I mentioned, please make sure that you're updating this. However, if you're still running into that problem and you've already submitted your UR and there's no issues and you checked the employer name, please reach out to us. A lot of the time, it's just that the employer name on our end maybe is too long for that 50 character limit. So we can make that edit, and then that should clear up that issue for you. All right. So moving right along. A lot of people have had questions about completing the benefit segments and the payment segments on SHROIs. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of put these two together. And Kathy, I'll answer your question here in just a second. So Kathy had a question. I'm going to actually go ahead and take her question first because it relates directly to that FROI that FROIUR that we've already got up on the screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and run through the benefit and payment segments on these SHROIs and FROIURs. So on the FROIUR, Kathy is having an issue with return to work fields being required. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my FROIUR. So you can see on this one that we've got an initial return to work date that's listed. So if you don't actually have a return to work, sometimes what will happen is if it was reported on the first report of injury, it may populate here. You can simply remove that field. So if we didn't have a return to work, we can remove that field. And then what we're going to want to do is just make sure all these fields related to return to work are blank. Now, what will happen is as soon as I take those and make them blank, you'll see return to work is no longer required. So if it's requiring an initial return to work date, just take a look at these other return to work fields and make sure that they're blank. If there's a yes or a no, it is going to look for an initial return to work date or latest return to work date. So just make sure those are nulled out if there is not a return to work date. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to actually save this as a draft. And I'm going to go into a Shroy filing. I'm actually going to just start a whole new Shroy filing. So this is one that I submitted a while back. And now since this claim, I'm just going to take a look at this claim and see what I've done. So it looks like I started this with a first report of injury. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm actually going to go through like I'm submitting an IP. I'm going to click this button up here. It's going to say submit to existing claim. You can always leave this because you're already on the claim here. So if you're clicking through the claim, no need to change this first one because it's always going to default to this claim that we're on. And now, since I know that I've done my first report of injury on this one, I'm just going to scroll down. I'm going to find my IP. Click next. And then it's going to pull my information over to that IP. So it'll just take a second here. Now, since this one was a 0-0, it's going to pull through a lot of information, but there are going to be certain data elements that we didn't have to complete on the 0-0 that we have to do on this Shroy transaction, this IP. And one that you are tend to be getting stuck on are our benefits. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down to this benefits section and focus here. So you can see here that we've got a benefits section and we've also got a payment section. We've also got this other benefits section. So the IP is kind of a unique transaction. The IP is the equivalent of our NOPLD if we're just trying to show our first payment that we're making. So it's most of the NOPLDs that you all do are probably going to be replaced by an IP unless for some reason you're denying the file, and that would be replaced by an 04 in the new system. So something that an IP is going to require is at least one benefit, and then it's also going to require a payment. Now, payments are very unique to IPs and PY transactions. So think of it as your NOPLD where you're showing your first payment. You're always going to have to put a payment segment in, and then your PY, which is going to be your NOBP equivalent. You're always going to want to put at least one payment in on that as well. So I'm going to start with the benefits. Now for this one, I'm going to say that I'm just paying temp total benefits. So I'm going to want to make sure that every single one of the fields on this little benefit segment is populated. I'm going to scroll all the way down to where it says temporary total. My gross weekly amount is just going to be my compensation rate. So I'm going to see if I have a compensation rate on this one yet, because I didn't type one in, so I'm just going to make one up. We'll say it's $600. Now my gross weekly amount effective date is almost always going to be your date of injury. There would only be some rare situations where it is not your date of injury. So 99% of the time it's going to be your date of injury. I'm going to check here. Looks like my date of injury is just saw it and then I just lost it. All right, it's 10/1/2020. So what's going to happen here is if I try and put a different date in, so let's say I do 10/2/2020, the system is going to, when I try and submit this, it's going to say that that date is not correct, that I have to have either the date of injury, unless I have an ACR segment, which we can talk about those a little bit later or in a future hour. Now, the next one is going to be my net weekly amount. When I think of net weekly amount, think of it kind of like your net pay on your check. Your gross total wages, that's going to include everything before taxes. That's going to include everything before your health insurance for your own check. Same exact thing with comp. Basically, most of the time, our gross weekly amount and our net weekly amount are going to equal. Our net weekly is only going to be different if we're taking some kind of reduction against this gross weekly amount. So in comp, we're going to think of that as child support liens, attorney withholdings, anything like that. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and say that I don't have anything that I'm withholding. So I'm going to make sure that those match. So they're both 600. Since I don't have some kind of adjustment that I'm taking, my gross and my net weekly effective dates are going to be the same. My benefit period start date is going to be the first day that I paid this benefit type. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I started paying this on 10/1, which was her date of injury. And then I'm going to go ahead and say that I have paid benefits through the 21st in this instance. Now, this is another section that is often confused. The benefit type claim weeks and days. So in Minnesota and in other places, we're a little bit unique. A lot of the time, as claim professionals, we think of weeks and days as numbers with decimals. So let's say in this instance, we're paying 3 weeks. But if we were paying 3 weeks and 1 day in Minnesota, in the old world, we would have thought of it as 10.2 weeks, right? Little bit different in the new world. So in this one, we're going to go ahead, we're going to put 3 because that's our weeks. Now I'm just going to go ahead as an example, I'm going to make this the 22nd. So now we've got 3 weeks in 1 day. Instead of making this 3.2, which we don't want, we're going to leave it as 3. We're going to type a 1 in the benefit type claim days. So your full weeks always going to go here. If you have any days that you're paying that don't make a full week, you're going to put those in the claim days. Now the benefit type amount paid, I'm just going to go ahead and put 2,400 here. We'll go ahead and we'll change that one back so that my math is correct. And then your benefit payment issue date is going to be the day that you actually issue this check. So I'm going to say that I issued this check on the 22nd, and we would be all good to go. Now, what's going to happen is if I submit this IP and then I come back in and I do my suspension transaction, my benefit segment is going to stay. It'll still be here. I just need to update it with the proper information. So let's say I came back in, I was doing my suspension, and I paid 3 more weeks of benefits. What's going to populate is this that I'm typing in right now. I would just need to adjust my through, my weeks, my days, and my amount paid. Now, along with this one, since it's an IP, I mentioned we also have to do our payment segment. So the payment segment is super easy once we've got our benefit segment done. It's pretty much just capturing a lot of what we've already put in our benefit segment and putting it into the payment segment. So for this one, we're going to do temp total. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the employee's name here as my payee. The payment amount, which is 2,400 in this case, my from and through dates, and then my issue date. This benefit payment issue date is always going to be very important. That is what we're going to look at to make sure that your payment was timely. So make sure that you are putting proper dates into the benefit payment and the payment issue dates when you submit these IPs. So I'm going to hold off on submitting this one. I just want to make sure that we cover any other questions related to Schroys beforehand. I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint. And we will go through the rest of these questions here and then any questions that you all have. So my transaction said it was submitted. Do I need to wait for DLI to approve it or do something with it before completing the next transaction? So if you were EDI submitters, I would say yes, but since you're eForms submitters, one of the huge benefits of being an eForm submitter is that you do not have to wait for us to do anything on our end. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click Save as Draft on this one. I'm going to save it and show you all exactly what I mean by that submitted. So if I go back to my home page here and I scroll down, you can see that I've got the My Form history here. And I have all these that are listed as draft and then these that are listed as submitted. So this one for Mary and then this one for test. Since they say submitted, you can assume that those are already accepted. You can go ahead and move to your next transaction. If they were successfully submitted, that means that they passed our edits and that DLI accepted them. Next question, where can I find the transactions that I have already submitted for a claim? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click into Mary Jo's claim here and show you all exactly, oh, I apologize, I clicked on the wrong link. Click on Test Employees Claim and show you all where to find those transactions. So if you're ever not sure what you've already submitted, all you have to do, you can click into the claim and click this Reporting History tab. So on this one, we know that all we've done so far is our first report of injury. We do have that IP that's sitting in draft status. That's not going to appear here because we haven't submitted it. But we know that we've submitted our first report of injury on this one. And then I'm going to go ahead and just hit this last question. And then Kathy, I see your question in the chat, and that's a great thing that we can go through next. So this next one, where can we find the documents that have been created for a claim from eForm submission? So very similar, we're going to click into the claim here, scroll down to the bottom, and we were just on our reporting history tab. If we want to find the documents, we can either click on this hyperlink in this reporting history tab, or we can click on our documents tab. And it's going to show us that first report of injury that was created. And this one, it's also going to show, it looks like we've got a few notices of representation. We've got a claim, access authorization. So we're also going to be able to see those. So Kathy had a really great question that I think all of you likely would like to see as well. So she just asked if we could possibly run through Sure You Are, and I think that's a great idea. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find a claim here that I have submitted at least a For You Are on, and I believe that I've got one for Mary Jo. I'm going to go ahead and just double check and make sure. It looks like I've got a For You Are that I submitted for Mary Jo, so we should be all good to file a For You Are on this one. Or Sure You Are, I apologize. So for our next action, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to click Sure You Are. And again, this is going to pull through the data that we updated on that For You Are. Now on the Sure You Are's, what we're really looking for is we, a lot of the time, are wanting to see the financials up to date. So you're going to want to make sure that you're completing, obviously, any fields that are required, like these that have asterisks on them. A lot of those you're going to have to do on the FROI already. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enter my insurer information on this one. So I'm using eForm insurer here. Copy and paste that from my claim file. For my employer fee and my insured fee, I know that those are the same, so I'm just going to copy and paste those. So we've already got our claim number here. We're going to want to put our claim admin email information and adjuster information. So I'll just put all of my contact information here. Our date of injury is already going to populate. Now, what I would tell you is, even if something doesn't have a little star next to it, it never hurts to provide us with additional information. So if I wanted, I can go ahead and I'll put my claim status in here. I'm going to put my claim type in here too, even though those aren't required, just because I know that they are something that I'm probably going to need in the future for my URs. And yeah, Lynette, I think you just mentioned the insurer fee should have copied over. Typically, it is going to copy over. It looks like it didn't in my test system for some reason, but that should be copying over since I did enter that on my for UR. I'm actually going to go ahead and do some additional information here. Just going to fill out this one so that I know that this information is here in the future and I know I've got time to do it. I'm actually going to update this average weekly wage. And the compensation amount. So you can see here, I've got my initial date last day worked, my initial date disability began, my initial date that the employer had disability. I'm actually going to go ahead and I am going to complete this first day of disability after the waiting period because I know that this is one that a lot of people have questions on. So the first day of disability after the waiting period is exactly as it sounds. It's going to be the very first day where the employee missed any time after the 3-day waiting period. So we can see here that Mary Jo first missed work on the 13th. So that means that our waiting period is the 13th, the 14th, the 15th. We see here that she had an initial return to work date of the 27th. So since we know that the waiting period is the 13th, 14th, 15th, this first day of disability after the waiting period must at least be the 16th. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the 16th here, just because I know I'm going to need that in the future. Now you can see here, for some reason it pulled over my latest return to work. I'm just going to null those out. I'm going to make those no because we don't have a latest return to work. You can see her initial return to work did pull through. Just always double check and make sure that all these fields are there if you did have a return to work. And then in this one, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I am going to update her benefit information. So the first time you do your UR, your benefit information won't populate. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enter it here. So I know that 600 was her gross weekly amount. Let's see here. If her date of injury was 3/31, so I'm going to use that as the wage effective date. My net weekly amount is still 600. My net weekly amount effective date is going to be the same as the gross in this situation. Now we know we didn't start paying her until the 13th. Do 4/13/2020. 4/26/2020. I think that's about 2 weeks. I don't have my date forecaster in front of me, so please forgive me if that's incorrect. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to go ahead and go with 2 weeks, and then I'm paying her $1,200. I'm going to say that I paid this on the 26th. Now you'll notice on this one, I don't have to do that payment segment. That's because this is a UR. So this information has already been reported to the department. We're just getting her benefits up to date. I'm going to skip all of this because we don't have any redistributions or anything of that nature. Before I click submit, though, I do want to run through a question that came through the chat. So that question was, what is the difference between a standard work week and a fixed work week? That's a great question. So if we go back up here to our employment details, you'll see here, I'm going to actually put 5. Standard work week is going to be your Monday through Friday 5-day work week. A fixed work week could be any number of days, but it's basically just indicating that the employee works the exact same schedule every single week, but for some reason it is not Monday through Friday. So let's say a really good example would be like a nurse who works 3 12-hour shifts, and they work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every week 12-hour shifts. That would be an example of a fixed work week. So in that instance, we'd make it a fixed work week. We'd make it 3 days. We'd go ahead and enter in our workday schedules Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now, let's say we have the exact same situation with that nurse, except she works 3 12-hour days every week and it rotates. It's not the same. In that instance, instead of putting a fixed work week, we would actually just put a varied work week and leave it at that. So for the purposes of this one, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to switch us back to just our standard work week of 5 days, but hopefully that clears up the confusion with standard and fixed work weeks. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this one to submit. Looks like I'm missing something. Oh, full wages paid for date of injury. This is a really good field to go over too. So you can see here it says that it must be null if 56 exists and is greater than the date of injury. Basically what this means is she did not have, she was not paid wages on the date of injury because her initial disability date wasn't until well after the date of injury. So in that instance, we can just make this a null. I'm going to look at this question. And Kathy, I'll address that question as soon as we submit this one. And then it looks like I must be missing another field on this one. Bear with me just a second here while I see if I can get this one to submit. For some reason, it's throwing an error, but with this one, we do have everything in place that this should submit. For some reason, I'm getting an issue with the permanent impairment, and so I apologize. I'll have to look at this one a little bit more closely. But everything here, as far as the benefits, should be totally fine to submit. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save this as a draft. And we can work on that one later. So there's a really good question in the chat. I don't know if I have any compliance folks on the line, but I may have you all help with this one. And this is probably a situation that a lot of you are dealing with. So what should we do on older claims that we have from the 70s and 80s if we don't have specific dates or other information from that time frame and the employees have been receiving perm total benefits for over 20 to 30 years? What should we be populating in the benefits segment? I don't know if we have anybody from compliance who would maybe want to offer some suggestions for that one. Melissa, I see you're on mute. You came off mute.
Oh, sorry. Now I think I'm echoing bad. I apologize. I know there's a couple other people, some CSOs from compliance on, so they can certainly jump in as well. And I apologize if there's background noise here. What we would need you to do, if you don't have the information, I mean, give us what you do have. So if you do have some general information where you can put in like a start date and an end date and like the sum of benefits paid, I'm assuming they're talking about like on the UR to start with. Give us that information. Otherwise, start with what you're paying now, and you can always upload documentation or a benefit addendum web form, even if you wanted to, but just a note explaining that, because we see it sometimes where it's come from another company and it was 40 years ago and you don't have all that information. So give us what you do have and just communicate with us about it. And then I don't know if Deb or Denise or anyone else on the line has anything they wanted to add to that. Maybe not. And I don't see Ralph on, so otherwise I would defer to him. But that's what I would say, is just give us what you do have and then do your best to communicate with us about it. We've run into that situation before and we can talk you through it.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. That's very helpful. So that is kind of the end of the questions that I have been seeing quite a bit from people. But I'm going to go ahead and just open it up to any questions that you all have as far as submitting eForms or just in general. And if we don't have any questions right now, we can always... Oh, it looks like I just got one. On my 4UR, I'm getting an error on the administrator address information. It is not letting me edit the city. Okay, so if you are running into address information, and I think Cheryl, I think I know exactly what you're running into. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pull something out of a draft status here, one of my FROIs. And you can confirm if this is what you're seeing. And a few of you might have seen this. So what I believe Cheryl is referring to is this claim administrator information right here, which it's not going to let you edit. So you can see here that I actually had that issue with this particular draft where it wasn't letting me edit the state. This information is always going to pull from your trading partner profile. So there are a couple ways that we can update this. If you want to update that or check and make sure that it is accurate on your end, what you can do is you can click View Profile here. This is going to take you to your trading partner profile. Now, what you're going to want to do here is take a look at addresses. So previously, I was missing the MN. And so what I did is I actually went ahead and I updated my profile. So if I do that, I can click this Update My Profile button. And I would just update all of this information, make sure my address is complete, make sure it says I'm licensed in Minnesota, my eForm, fill out my business contact information, which I'm not going to worry about here. And then I would also fill out just my company submission information. So that's one way you can do it. If you notice that it is just a missing address attribute, you can also email us and you can let us know. You can let us know exactly what part of your address isn't populating and what trading partner you work for. A lot of the time we can update that on our end. If for some reason we cannot update it on our end, we will just have you go ahead and submit that trading partner profile update with the full address and we can approve that. Okay. TPD is the initial last time payment and is an ongoing benefit. Do we file an IP with no payment information? And then do we file another IP once we receive wage information to pay TPD? Melissa, I'm actually going to have you answer that one from a compliance perspective, if you don't mind.
Sorry about that. Which question are we on?
Yeah, it said TPD is the initial lost time payment and is an ongoing benefit. Do we file an IP with no payment information, and then do we file another IP once we receive the wage information?
Gotcha. Thanks, Angie. Well, you wouldn't be able to file two IPs because of sequencing for EDI, but what you can do is file a PD, which is a partial denial, and similar to the NOPLD box 2 from the past, where you're saying, hey, I'm accepting this claim, but I'm not paying wage benefits at this time. And the reason would be because you don't have the wage loss information where temp partial isn't due yet. You're still waiting on that information. So you can file that PD as your action at that time to say, heads up, we're waiting on this wage loss information, and then you'd be able to file the IP when you actually make that payment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. All right. And the next question that I had here was asking if we could actually run through a partial denial. In this situation, the person was paid medical benefits only. The last time was denied. So in that instance, Melissa, I might actually throw this one back to you. Would we want them to file a partial denial, or would we want an O4 on that one?
You could do an O4 on that if you're denying all the indemnity benefits, even if you're paying medical. So you would file that denial and explain why you're denying the indemnity benefits.
And Lynette, I might actually have you send us the information for that file where you were running into that issue. I've not heard of an issue where you're not able to submit the PDs yet. So if you want to just send that over to me, you can just send it to my email address. I can put that in the chat in a little bit and we can take a look at that one. For UIs for asbestosis claims. So if we have a FOR UI for an asbestosis claim with related litigation, the WID is required, but there's not yet a WID assigned to the matter. How do we complete and submit the form? So the WID actually probably does exist already. That is going to be a little bit different from your campus file number, which wouldn't exist quite yet. So in that instance, what I would recommend doing is just contacting our EDI department. They can look up that employee's information. I'm going to double check and see. I'm just going to take a look at my tables really quickly on that one and see if the WID is in fact required or if that is an error that we're getting. I believe that it may be, but I just want to double check. And it actually does not look like we would require the WID on that one. So I will run through that in my test system and I'll make sure that it's not requiring that WID. You would need, I believe the UI is very, very basic. I think you may need to provide the social security number or the PIN number for the employee. So if you don't have a social security number for some reason for that employee, you can contact us and we can get you the social, we can get you the WID. We would just create that employee in the system. But I'll double check that. It sounds like that could be a defect if it truly is requiring the WID. And Lynette, thanks for sending that claim number over. I will go ahead and make a note of that and take a look at that one. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I would also like to open up the floor Melissa, anyone from compliance, if there's anything that you all are noticing with eForms or any kind of helpful tips or tricks that you guys have to add to this presentation, that would be awesome. If not, otherwise we can give people a little bit of time back in their day. Oh, yes, there was just a question that someone had about an issue we were working on last week with the MTC date. So in some instances, people were experiencing an issue where they were getting an error saying that their MTC date had to be greater than the injury date, which in this instance, everything looked to be set up correctly. It was truly an error. So that one is actually part of our fix that is going out tonight. So if you're having that issue, it should be resolved tomorrow, I believe. All right, another one. We submitted a UR on a legacy claim. I need to file the IP, but campus is not allowing it. How do we open the file? Renee, I'm going to have you go ahead and send that claim information over so that we can take a look and figure out why the IP is not an option. It's possible that an NOPLD was already submitted or something of that nature, so we can take a look at that one. Okay. This is another really good question. So Rochelle had a question. So we may have already covered this, but should Froy and Troy URs be filed now or when we have additional action on the claim? So that is kind of up to your discretion and your workflow. I would recommend, just so you don't go crazy filing URs on everything right now, maybe just kind of filing them as your next action comes up. Really, the only requirement for those is that if you've already submitted your 00, you need to do your Froy UR. If you've already submitted your NOPLD equivalent or have a first action on the claim, you would also need to do your Shroy UR. Now, let's say you need to do like a suspension transaction and you know that you need to get it in right now. I would recommend on those just getting it done right away. Do your Froy UR, do your Shroy UR. That way you can do your suspension transaction. If it's something where you've got a little bit of time, let's say you don't have to do anything for another 6 months when your essay is due, your semi-annual is due. That one, you could probably hold off on submitting those URs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, I don't believe that we have anything time-wise related to the filing of URs. I believe that's just whenever they need to be filed as a precursor to a subsequent filing, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And you hit the nail on the head just in that when it comes time that you need to file something else and you have not already done the URs, you would have to get those submitted. So if that would become an issue where it takes a day to gather the information, or it just takes a little time for you to get those in, and now you're coming up on that deadline to file the form that actually needs to be filed, keep that in mind, and it might not be a bad idea to get those done now or sooner rather than later, but there's not an actual firm deadline on those.
Thanks, Melissa. So the last thing I kind of wanted to ask with this, I know this is the first time that we've done this answer hour that's kind of specific for eForm filers, and feel free to put some feedback in the chat with this. Is this something that you all would think we'd benefit from continuing if we scheduled another one in the next couple of weeks, just so you guys can ask specific eForm questions? Or do you feel like this is something that we can include with our EDI answer hours? Just kind of wanted to gauge the needs of this group. If it's something that you all find is beneficial, we can certainly continue. Okay, so I'm seeing some yeses. So yeah, we'll schedule another one of these in a couple weeks. Just because your needs are obviously very different, and we'll just kind of keep track of the issues that you guys are coming across. We'll look to schedule one the week of the 15th, I believe that is already in 2 weeks, or the 14th. Any other questions or anything else anybody would like to add? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of wrap things up here. So last couple slides, Campus Central page. I know you all have already seen this, but this is kind of our page where you can view just the most recent information about campus. I believe we are looking to start publishing more of our release information. So when we're making releases to improve or fix some defects in the system, I believe we're going to start publishing more of that information to that Campus Central page. And then additionally, I'm going to skip over that question one. These are the answer hours that we have planned for this week. So we've got another one today for insurers and trading partners that a lot of you probably would be interested in. I believe that that one is at 11. And then it's it is 11, I believe. We've got another one of those that will come out next week. And then I will look at making sure that we've got an eForm answer hour for you all this week of the 14th. And Lynette, I just saw your message. I'll go ahead and get that logged that your insurer fee is not carrying over from those 4 URs. So if there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and give you all a couple minutes back. As always, just please feel free to send us any email or send us emails, get in touch if you're experiencing issues, continue to contact the help desk if you're having issues, and we will make sure to kind of handle those as they come in. But otherwise, I will see some of you all on the answer hour this afternoon, and we will talk again in a couple weeks here. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.